Well, welcome everyone. Time is 6:33 to be exact. And I'd love to call the District 204 Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Marilyn, can you call the roll?
Member Albert? Here. Member Vita Daniels?
Here.
Member Dillon?
Here.
Member Gretsch?
Here.
Member Kelly?
Here.
Member Swinehart?
Here.
Member Thomas?
Here.
Thank you, Marilyn. Marilyn, do we have any agenda-related comments?
No.
All right. All right, so we are going to go right into the agenda then. We're going to start with the finance. There's 2 items related to the finance. So let's start with the initial tax levy presentation. Brian Station.
Thank you, Vice President Kelly. So, normally, at this particular meeting, I would present the board with the first of 5 looks at the upcoming tax levy that you would have. So meaning, usually I introduce it at the October finance portion of the meeting, and then we look at it again twice in November, and then twice again in December. However, I know you're all disappointed, but at the particular time, I don't have the information that I actually need to generate the new levy for the 2022 year. The reason that is because Cook County has delayed all of their work for this year. And so you'll know that because you don't even have your second property tax bill, your second installment property tax bill yet. And so ultimately, we're being told that we should have that final tax levy information from the 2021 year here toward the end of October, which will be very helpful because, again, since the 2022 levy builds on the 2021 levy, it's kind of important to have those numbers and then bring those numbers forward and apply the changes to it. So, that being said, there are a couple of bulleted points I just wanted to share with the board, a couple of points that we do know. First of all, in December of 2021, which is the consumer price index that we will use for applying an increase to the total levy, inflation was 7%. We all know that. We've seen that essentially in what the cost to our own home economics, that sort of thing. And we are capped at 5% according to the property tax extension limitation law. So the thought would be that we would be raising our tax levy at least 5% on existing properties for the 2022 levy. Again, that coincides with that cap of 5%. In addition to that, there will also be some value assigned to new property. So these new properties that come onto the tax rolls, they will also have additional value to the levy. And so ultimately what I think we'll be asking for is somewhere in the neighborhood, we know for sure the floor would be 5%, will probably be between 5 and 7% total. And that's quite a bit different than what we've seen in past years when we would have a CPI of 1.4% last year, and then we'd add some new property to that, another maybe 1.5%, and we'd be around 3%. So obviously we're seeing a little bit higher number there. In addition to that, the district historically has conducted the truth and taxation hearing in December. We have done that regardless of whether we were required to or not, and since I've been here, we've not been required to. The only time you're required is if you're asking for over 5% from the prior year. So this year, while it won't be new, we would actually be required to do so based on those percentage increases that we're seeing here. And again, just to kind of give you an idea there, 5% increase would bring in about $3.5 million new dollars to the district. That's just on the 5% increase. That doesn't include any new property value in there. So I would expect that somewhere we would be about $4.5 million of new money to the district. Again, depending on new property. I don't really know that yet, but we'll have to find out. And then, of course, the timeline is such that we would adopt an estimated in November, and then we have to wait at least 20 days before we adopt the final, and there's 20 days between the 2 board meetings. And then we adopt the final in December, after the hearing, of course, and then we make sure we have our documents to the county no later than the last Tuesday in December, because that is the final due date. And so, really, right now, I thought about giving you something that has numbers on it, and I thought I'm kind of wasting everybody's time, because I can give you that, and then when we come back in November, assuming that I have the actual documents, I can start to give you much more accurate information And November would kind of, or the October presentation would kind of be, I think, a waste in terms of actually putting those numbers to it, because we don't really know what they are yet from the prior year. So that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions. This is just a brief update on a couple of the points that we know at this point. And the anticipation and hope certainly is that we'll have the final documentation at the end of October, so we can get an accurate picture in November. Part of that, of course, requires us, as I mentioned in the hearing, we have to publish in the newspaper. When we publish in the newspaper, we actually have to have actual percentage increases over the prior year levy. So I'm really hopeful that we're gonna know those numbers at that point, because otherwise I'm not exactly sure how we would move forward with the correct information. So again, just a brief discussion on where we are with that, why we're not presenting the numbers portion of it tonight, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from anybody regarding what we have here so far.
Any other ramifications of going over that 5% cap?
No. No, the only requirement that we have is then we actually have to have that truth and taxation hearing. And we've been doing that all along. The district has always believed in transparency of that, which is good. And so what we'll do then is we will have the hearing as we normally would, only we will be above a 5% ask for increase for the following year.
Because of the inclusion of additional property.
Yeah.
Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct. Plus we would hit it even at the 5% mark with just the CPI number at 5%.
Okay.
So then it's 5% or above. I guess maybe I wasn't clear on that. It's 5% or above. So if you're at 4.999, you're okay. You're not required to do it. Once you get to 5, you're required. And of course, we'll even be a little bit higher than that.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's great that we've been in the practice of having this hearing each year, so that nothing seems unusual. It's just normal course. One question is, when the memo says that we are capped at 5% as opposed to CPI, which is higher than 5%, that's Illinois statute that is mandating that, I presume?
That is the property tax extension limitation law.
Okay.
And that is adopted by counties, and so Cook County has that in place. And so, yes, we are capped at the lesser of 5% or the CPI.
And my follow-up question is, when they refer to the CPI, is it December CPI? It's not any other calculation? I understand CPI is often reported monthly, and it has moved a lot, as everybody knows.
That's right.
So it's the December
It is
number.
December of any given year, and then
Okay.
it's applied to the following year.
Yep.
So the December CPI for, like I said, this year was 7%. And we will apply that to the 2022 tax levy. But remember, we're still waiting on the second collection of the 2021 tax levy.
Right.
So that moves into that following year, essentially.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure?
Brian, you mentioned also, because I know we have always published this with the newspapers before the end of the year. So what is the deadline on that? And has anything like this ever happened before if we don't have that information? I mean, what would actually happen?
Well, that's a great question. And I haven't researched all of that yet. Ultimately,
Okay.
we would still put something in the newspaper, right? We would work with our lawyers on that to say, hey, look, we don't have this information. What do you think we should put in there? And we haven't gone down that road yet, because we're not there. We're being told that we should see this information before that. But by statute, the notification in the newspaper of the hearing is no less than 7 and no more than 14 days prior to the hearing. So we have to be within that sort of week window for publication. So that really does put us, later into November, early December. So again, we're being told right now that we should have this information prior to that, and we should be able to get the actual. Now, if that changes, that's when we'll consult with our lawyers and ask them what they think we should do and make sure that
Right.
we have all of that information correct as we go forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure?
All right. The next item under finance is a resolution to transfer funds. Brian Stashak.
Thank you again. So this is also a direct result of the late property tax collections. So in our bond and interest fund, we currently have a balance of $1,431,000. We have a bond payment due. Again, bond payment is based on money that we borrowed as part of the 2013, 2014 bond issuance. We have a bond payment due of $2,556,000 on December 15th. So ultimately, we are $1,124,000 short of being able to make that payment. But to be clear, that's only in a ledger account, right? We have enough, the district has enough cash to actually make that payment. That's not the issue. It's not as though we have to borrow money to pay back borrowed money. So it's just in the ledger account. And so ultimately, what this resolution allows us to do is to transfer that $1,124,000 into the bond and interest fund to make our December 15th payment, if necessary. And I say if necessary because there still is the possibility that we start collecting property tax money for that second collection. So let's assume they get the bills out around the end of November. Immediately, what ends up happening is a lot of banks with escrow accounts, they will start making payments right away. We will also, through that month of December, many of the homeowners who pay, they will also pay right up front and get it off their plate type of thing. And so we will start to see money coming in the month of December for our second collection of that tax levy. If in fact that's the case, hopefully one of two things happens. Either A, we collect enough money of that money to pay without having to transfer any money. Or B, the other option is that we take whatever money we collect from property taxes, and the first $1,124,000, we just put that into the bond and interest fund, and then we make our journal entries to make sure that every fund is made whole based on the percentage collection of the levy, right? So what I mean by that is if we take the first $1 million, $1.1 million, and put it into the O&M fund, we have to account for that. Bond and interest fund. We account for that, and then we say, okay, it's already received this percentage, and now we have to readjust all the rest of the percentages. So if the ed fund is due 70% of the levy, then at the end of the fiscal year, we'll make sure that 70% of that amount is in there. Because if not, our auditors would tell us we didn't do something correctly. So that's what we would do. So that is the ideal situation, one of those two things happening first. And the reason that is because if we move any money over to the bond and interest fund, we can't get it back out. And so it stays in there, and that's what happens to it. So it's not the ideal situation to actually move money into this fund. And so I am hopeful that one of those other two situations will present itself, and we don't have to transfer the money. However, knowing what I know right now, we would ask the board during the October meeting to pass this resolution so it allows us to move the money in the event that we have to do it. My goal still is not to, but we do have that as another tool to make sure that we're not going negative in one of our ledger accounts. Again, that's a point of clarity here. The district has enough cash on hand to make its payment. It's more just the ledger account that is the issue. And of course, they don't want you running negative balances in your ledger account. So that's another point that the auditors would say, hey, you ran a negative balance in this account, you can't do that. And they're right, we're not supposed to do that. So really what this does is it authorizes the transfer up to that $1,124,000 if needed. And if we don't need it, even better, then we don't have to transfer any of those dollars. So that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions on this proposal here as well.
Good.
I also may end up bringing another resolution forward because we still have to follow, our education fund is going to be fine. We have to monitor our transportation fund, our O&M fund, and even our IMRF Social Security fund. I think we're gonna have enough cash in those ledgers to make it through until December. However, there could be a time when we would have to move some money into one of those too, just because of this particular situation. Again, we have enough cash to make those payments. The majority of it, though, sits in the education fund, so we might have, now at least if we had to move cash to some of those other funds, we can get it back out, which is good. It's just the bond and interest fund that has that stipulation to it, that once you put it in there, you can't remove it back out.
And as far as we know, with this being this late billing cycle and installment for the real estate taxes. As far as we know, would we expect, March 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, or 5th, whatever it is, to be the next normal one? So we will have quite a lot of inflow in a short amount of time? Or don't we have the clarity into next year yet?
I don't think there's clarity. And the
Okay.
reason I say that is because you're right. Normally, that first installment of the 2022 levy would be due March 1st.
Right, right.
I've heard discussions that at the General Assembly and governor level, that they may delay that because of this payment being due so late into December. And that they may delay that payment a month or two for a little relief as far as, for the homeowners in the state.
Okay. Hopefully keeping it within most school boards' fiscal years that end
Yeah.
June 30.
Right. I think they'll do that, and
Okay.
they're cognizant of that. I think, I haven't heard anything official on that. That's just some of the talk that we've heard from a few people that they may end up doing that.
Interesting.
But you're right, we will be flush with cash in December, January, February, March, when typically we're kind of at a lower point, so it'll be a little different for us. But we'll invest all of it and do that.
Okay,
All right,
so that will come back to the board for consideration at the October 17th meeting.
there's one agenda related to facilities, and it is the summer 2023 projects update. Brian Zaschek.
Thank you again, Vice President Kelly. So, unfortunately here, we don't have some of the greatest news to present tonight regarding our summer of 2023 capital projects. We have potentially some options, but we're gonna have to look at those, and that's kind of why we wanted to talk to you tonight about these. We're out to bid right now for our summer 2023 projects, and as you recall, that's, J-Wing air conditioning at South Campus, the air handling units here in the library, LTTV, and of course, we also have the roofing project here at North Campus as well. One of the issues that we're running into with the air handling units is the delay on order and delivery of these. So we currently have the bids out there right now. We're going to be opening those, I think, if I remember, October 13th. And we're actually hoping to kind of get some board approval. We're running it right up to the deadline there for the board meeting here in October. We're hoping to get some approval on those at the regular October board meeting. This is about 2 months earlier than what we would even normally operate in that process. Normally, we would open those up probably end of November, bring them back to the board in December, and we would have no issues. Under the current situation, we're not in that arena any longer. And so both Ed Wright and Paul Guide are here from DLA Architects. Ed had called me, Ed, last week, and we talked through some of these timing issues. And so we're looking right now generally at anywhere from roughly 40 weeks to have air handling units, delivered. And so even if we were to get board approval in October, the timeline we talked about was the units would be ordered maybe sometime in November, which might put them for delivery here in late August or September, or that's without any delays. That's a bit of an issue for us, but we're kind of talking through what we may and what we may not be able to do with that. So I'm going to actually kind of turn it over to Ed and Paul and kind of let them talk a little bit about what's going on with this, and then kind of give them, talk about some of the options and things we talked about.
Sure. So, good evening, everybody. It's good to see all of you. It's been a little while. Brian, you hit most of the big points. Basically, once we were designing the project, going out to bid, the manufacturers notified us that they're about 41 weeks. We have to take them at their word. We saw what happened last year with the Vaughn units that we ordered last December that we're not going to have till this December now. It's already moved another month from November. So we have to believe that that's true. They may be protecting themselves because they don't want to deal with the headaches of keep telling people they're delayed. So maybe these things come early, but right now we have to plan as if they're not. So as Brian said, that puts us out into September for the units themselves. The good news is there is work that can happen in the building that can get completed over the summer to be ready for the new units. So that's a positive. We can get everything done that we need to on the inside of the building when kids aren't here. If the units do come early, they're on the roofs, they're out of classrooms. They provide heat and ventilation. We can use windows for ventilation for code, that's okay. The concern is if we get into the heating season and we don't have a unit up there to heat the classrooms, that would be a problem. So should we get lucky and the units come early and we feel like there's enough of a window to get them in before the heating season hits, we can do that this year still, potentially. But the more likely scenario is that once we hit spring and we transfer over into the cooling season, that we could start that work potentially during the school year. It shouldn't impact kids because it's on the roof. We don't need heat. You don't have cooling in, well, you have cooling in J-Wing and LTTV, so that may be an issue. We may want to wait on those. J-Wing, we currently don't. So we could potentially start that work during the spring and get those in and then be ready to go for summer school, possibly. So that's kind of what we're looking at. At this point, there is no good solution other than to continue forward and see what happens if we wait. We're just going to push it back another, 41 weeks. It just keeps going back further. So that's kind of where we are right now. I guess, again, the good news with J-Wing is you're not having issues with that equipment, so to speak. It's more we're trying to update it to allow for cooling, so that unit will be okay to run. The two at this building, the reason for replacing them is because they've been very troublesome. So Brad and his team will have to do a little bit more work should anything come up to keep them working throughout the winter, but he's assured me he's very confident of that. So, is that right, Brad? So that's kind of where we are with that right now. The other piece to this that's not in the letter, but it's something that we're starting to see, is costs are coming back higher. Brian's mentioning the inflation. We've tried to be conservative in the budgets that we've already put out, but I can tell you that if a contractor thinks he's going to have to wait a year, he or she has to wait a year, they're probably going to put a little more money on it to protect themselves because they don't want to take a loss, whether it's storage or whatever they have to add. So I wouldn't be surprised if the bids come back a little bit higher than normal. We're seeing that across the board with projects, and this is an early project. It's one of the first to be out there for the season for schools. And the few that we've put out already in the last few weeks, we're already seeing that trend. So don't be surprised if that happens. We're hopeful that it won't, but that's the possibility. I think we're okay with the roof, but those two projects in particular, that's what we're looking at. The other piece of this, you're going to have to do this work at some point anyway, so the effort's not wasted, and should things be crazy and you decide to wait, you have a baseline for what the cost could be, the drawings are ready to go, and we could just put it out at another time. So that may be less of a possibility here just because of the condition of those units, but J may be an option to wait on. So we'll have more for you when we open the bids next Thursday, and then we can come and talk about that in more detail as to how everything's looking. But that's, I'll let you guys know now as opposed to, in the middle of the summer when things aren't arriving.
So next Thursday is, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
as I say, this doesn't change the path forward. Like, we're still gonna open the bids next Thursday and bring that information back to the board on the 17th. See what they come back at.
Can you remind us about, I guess, the financial, have there been financial changes to the North Campus Fieldhouse project? That was work that was supposed to occur this past summer. It's now going to occur next summer.
And we're still waiting
do the
on.
bids hold?
They held, the contractor's still waiting on kind of final details. Like I said, it just, as we're pressing them, it just pushed another month, so
Okay.
it's hard for them to know. They're gonna have to store the units, that's one of the major costs, is they have to put it in a warehouse and pay a rental fee. It's not a huge fee, we're probably talking a couple % on the project.
Okay.
But now it's the longer it takes, the less of a rental you guys have to pay, but it'd be nice to have the equipment in hand to know we can get started.
But they're essentially holding firm on like labor costs and,
For now, we've
could-
been
there
asking
could-
them for a while.
okay.
Something may change, and, we may have to have a conversation about that. We may have to talk to your attorneys if we really want to go down a road of trying to hold them to a contract. It may be more of a force majeure thing where it's out of their hands, labor costs went up because the unions, negotiated something different. Now they're stuck taking a loss, which I don't know if that's fair for them to take, but, hopefully it's not too bad.
just trying to kind of think about a recent example and how that might inform our thought process with this. but-
Fortunately, as part of these bids, we've kind of built this in to the project, saying you have to put it in when we're in cooling season, period. So if that means you have to build storage in your bid, build storage in your bid. So that, when I talk about the increase in costs, they may be padding to protect themselves for those things, but on the backside, we shouldn't see any more.
So I have, just to kind of understand it on a big picture, if we're waiting till 2024 possibly to put it in, would it make more sense to, knowing the lead time on it, to put it on a different year's budget and do a different project? because we have that whole list of things going on.
My only concern is, as I mentioned, I've put out a few projects early because of what we've been seeing, just to test the waters, and we're kind of late to the game if we're doing any other major type of
Got it, okay.
renovation. So we're probably going to pay a premium on those, and if there are things you can wait on, I'm recommending clients to wait.
Okay.
Let's see if the market adjusts. I'm expecting that there's going to be a lot of districts, pausing on projects when they see bid numbers come back. We're seeing 30 to 50% on some of these, so.
Man.
Okay.
Well, and to that point also, I thought about that, right? Maybe we cancel these, but
Not cancel it, but like put it on to a different
Delay it.
year, but preemptively
Yeah.
order it, knowing that it would be for the summer of 2024.
yeah, I mean, ultimately, we're still gonna be in the same boat though, because we're still looking at, and this is exactly, I thought about that same thing. If it's 40 weeks, it's gonna be 40 weeks whether we do it now, and we might as well just go forward with it now. I will adjust the budget down, right? Remember I had talked about when we adopted the budget, well, a few weeks ago, I had said, if there was some change in the construction, we would adjust, we would amend the budget and adjust that down, and we may end up doing that. But from the project perspective, I think it probably makes more sense to move forward with these now, Ed, right? To get them ordered
Certainly.
and keep going forward.
And on the
Well, that
budget
was-
side of things, one of the biggest costs of this is the equipment itself. We're going to have to pay for the equipment, or at least a good portion of it on the front side, just to get it in production. So you're still going to be paying a good majority of this in this current fiscal year. And then the tail end will be in the next fiscal year, which usually straddle two anyway for these projects, don't you, Brian?
It does, that's right.
I guess a different way of asking Jill's question, or perhaps a different way, or perhaps it was your question. So I had a
You
similar
probably have a
thought.
better explanation,
No,
being the
I-
finance person. Okay, go for it.
I know that at sometimes, or oftentimes, we're asking about capital projects, and it's not just a cost situation, there's not enough room in the space to have multiple things going on at the same time. If there's less physical work going on next summer, are there other projects, smaller scale projects that could be kind of feathered in? Meaning, we always have this small window when students are not, or 4,000 students are not in the building to get it all done, or get a lot of it done. So are there, that was my
I mean,
question. Was that your
I think that's
question or
tying
different
into it, a little
question?
bit different, but tying in, because I hate to have a summer wasted,
Right.
not doing a project when, one, it's not on the budget, and two, we don't have.
And
the
to that
time.
end, I wouldn't say that it's wasted, because there is work that has to happen in the building that will have to happen in the summer no matter what. They have to
Okay.
go into the ceilings and do stuff with the ductwork and the controls and all that stuff. That is still going to happen during the summer. It's just the physical unit itself, so the disruption's still going to occur. And then additionally, we'll have the work going on at Vaughn, the work going on at this building with the roofs. That's going to cause some issues on that side of the building where we don't want people in there either. So there will still be some work happening this summer.
I just have one more question to tie in. So like, but if you're doing the preemptive work, like, like the ceilings and all of that other stuff, will that still tie into the old units?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like we're going without a unit, because you were saying with the ventilation
Right.
and the
It'll
heating
still
concern.
blow through. It just, the controls aren't going to be operating optimally, but they don't now.
Okay, so it's
It'll
not-
do the things it's supposed to do, just,
Because I was envisioning it being shut down.
no.
Okay, and that was where I was concerned.
No, I just am piggybacking on that too, though. Moving forward, if lead times and supply chain issues don't course correct, do we start these conversations earlier? Can we adjust our cycle for approvals and budgeting and things like that so that we aren't having such, situations like this?
It's certainly something that we can consider. One of the challenges, and it doesn't make it impossible, but something we'll have to consider, is generally once the construction season starts, which is when we would be doing this, contractors aren't really looking to bid work. They're busy working on the work, and so it's hard to even get them to look at it. And if we do, they're just going to throw a number on it because they're plenty busy right now. What do they care? We go out too early, and it'll be the same thing.
Got it.
All right, we got to protect ourselves a year and a half down the road, so we'll throw another 20% on it just because. So it's a tightrope walk for sure. It's certainly something we should be thinking about. One thing that we've been talking about with a number of districts is, if we know we're going to be doing some projects anyway, at some point in the next 2 years, whatever, we could start the process of having them ready to go. And if that timing seems right, it's out on the street. You're not waiting 2 months to do drawings. It's ready to go out, and then we put it out when the time makes sense. there's some stuff. We'll definitely be having conversations to be prepared for next year sooner than later.
Yeah, and the other difficulty with that too is, you know, certainly I put together a financial projection, right?
Right.
And if we start saying, well, we're gonna go out, you know, this is what we want 2 or 3 summers from now, the financial landscape could be very different from what, at the point that we made that decision.
Right.
So that's, again, not saying it's impossible, but it certainly makes it a little more difficult to say, sure, we're gonna spend, you know, $5 million 3 years from now, and we don't know what that financial landscape looks like.
The way things are going right now, they're going to put themselves out of work because it's not tenable to put projects together that far in advance. So people are just gonna wait, and my fingers are crossed, that's gonna just automatically cause that course to correct here within the next year or so.
This particular bog, though, seems like it's not anything related to labor, but rather manufacturers and
It's
the
the
ability and the
physical
supply chain
equipment.
issues and the physical equipment.
Yep.
So to Jill's question, when we're looking at projects where there's going to be a big outlay towards a big physical unit, are we able to do anything in that area to try to secure?
We can absolutely pre-order equipment, then you have the equipment, and we have to store it until you can do it, but we can absolutely do that, and that's something that we do if you're committed to doing a project. You know, an example would be if you did that, and then suddenly the bids come back and they're way out of line, and it's something that you're not comfortable spending an extra $1 million on, as an example. Now you're stuck with equipment that you don't want to install, but you're kind of forced to install because you've already purchased it, and you're bound to whatever the latest. So there's risk to all of it, but there are things to consider for sure.
Yeah, and I understand, I think probably in the scope and the priority of some of the work, though, such as these air handling units that are, have been very problematic, like, we would, you know, I'm assuming that's something that we would have said, we absolutely have to do it, so let's get the equipment here and so forth, but
Sure.
I hear what you're saying. The other question that I had is, once the air handlers get here, and I understood that it's not interior work, it's all exterior, how long is it actually to install those air handling units at North?
And that, we're thinking it's probably around 4 weeks with removal and installation. We're gonna get a better handle on that when we get the bids back. That'll be the first question we ask the contractors to come back to you all with when you accept the bids, so that we need to hear from them, but that's our estimate of the time frame.
All right. Is that everything, guys?
Yeah, I think that's it.
That's enough for me.
We'll have the bids for the board to review October 17th.
Yeah, and then after we receive the bids, Ed and his team will, you know, talk to the contractors, the low bid contractors, and ask them, you know, hey, where are you at with this project? How soon do you get? So we'll have some more information coming up at the October board meeting. But unfortunately, like we said, it's, you know, we're just out there right now, and we're stuck with everybody else. I think one of the things that's happened here is a lot of districts, and Ed, you can confirm this for me, when they received their ESSER funds due to the pandemic, a lot of districts went out there and started running
That's the biggest problem here.
HVAC projects. And so,
Everyone had free money doing projects that they weren't going to do,
Yeah.
and then a supply chain and a confluence
Right.
of events that are causing
yeah,
this.
and we're right there with them too.
Right.
We're doing the same thing, so. Okay.
Well,
evening.
Ed, Paul, and Brad, thank you very much for working on this, and hopefully we'll see some good news, at least of the dollar amounts for next week.
I like that thought.
More to come.
Right?
Yeah, I like that thought.
Better news, please.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Guys, appreciate it. All right, moving on to curriculum, we have 3 agenda items related to curriculum and instruction. Our first item is the second reading of the curriculum change proposals. Scott Egerton.
Thank you, Vice President Kelly. We are having a second reading this evening of these curriculum change proposals. There have been no major changes. There was additional information requested regarding the 2 engineering courses, which have been included. Everything else is the same as it was last month. The only difference is there is a recommended administrative recommendation, and the administration recommends all of these proposals. I can go through each one if you'd like, or if you have specific questions. I mean, really nothing has changed, but be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anyone? I know we went through this before, so we've gone through that. So any questions at all? All right.
These will come back also on the 17th then for approval.
For approval.
Second reading
Right.
approval, yep.
And we can get everything in the academic program guide, and kids can choose in January, February.
All right, good. The next item is a second reading of the 2023-2024 school year calendar. Scott Eggerding.
Thank you again. This one, we talked about last month, but things have changed, so we'll probably have more conversation about this one. If you'll recall, we talked about two different options, one starting on August 17th and the other August 21st, for a couple different reasons. Ultimately, we posted both of those options on the website and talked to different community groups and focus groups and student advisories, all that kind of thing. And essentially, the preference is pretty overwhelming to start on the 21st. The couple days that we might gain by starting a few days earlier, people didn't like then that we were taking odd vacations in the spring or adding on to winter break. And some people really didn't like starting as early as the 17th, just in general, feeling that summer vacation is too short. So what we have in this proposal then for next year would start on the 21st of August for students. We would have the freshman experience day the Friday before, as we did this year. The last day of semester one will be December 22nd. Will be a full 2-week break with 3 weekends plus the January Institute Day through that winter break to January 9th. We were looking at some changes to our parent-teacher conferences, and if you'll look on the 26th of October on the draft calendar, there's a early dismissal box there. One of the things we haven't had the opportunity to do is to have any conferences during the day. We've had parents ask if there could be conferences during the day. In the past, we start at 5, both evenings. What this would do is it would do two things. We would have an evening conference on the 25th, starting at 5. On the 26th, we'd have a half day of school. Students would be here till 11:30. There would be a break, and then we would have afternoon conferences. Then there'd be another break for dinner, and then evening conferences. So we're essentially adding a few more hours of conferences. We have had a number of our teachers, especially our AP teachers and honors and some accelerated level classes that have multiple parents they need to call afterwards. Parents aren't able to get in to speak with their teachers. So we feel that we won't have any problem filling those extra slots. What that does, though, is it does add another, essentially a full teacher workday. So we would be adding that workday on Friday, February 16th, to make a 4-day weekend with President's Day weekend. You might ask, well, why aren't we just counting the 27th, the day after as that day? We have a leap year, and a leap year adds another day into the calendar, which we have a specific number of days, 176 for teachers, and 176 for students, and 183 for teachers. So we have to balance that. So that would be the solution. So if you're wondering why there's this random February 16th Friday, 4-day weekend with President's Day, it's to accommodate those conferences and also to allow us to have additional conferences. So that's something we've talked with our association about, and they've been amenable to that. Our spring break hasn't changed from either of the.
Not real quick.
Oh,
Just
sure.
Just real quick, before we
Yeah.
go on from that, I apologize, I'm not tracking with you.
Mhm.
So the extra half day of conferences would take place for teachers because students will be released early dismissal day.
Mhm.
And if we weren't trying to accommodate that extra half day of conferences, that would not be an early dismissal day?
We could do it that way, correct. We could have a full day of school and no early dismissal and have a third as fewer conferences and need to give up a half day in the spring.
Okay, so a third fewer, the standard amount of conferences that we had.
Right.
Basically,
Right.
not without the ad. So so I understand that, and I understand what you're trying to do there, but where does the extra, because of that, because teachers, whether it would be a school improvement day or not, teachers, it's still a full work day for teachers, so I didn't understand
To
how
3
that's
o'clock.
adding.
But we're gonna be adding conferences from the night before and the next evening, the equivalent of an additional day.
So, which we always do,
Right.
and so then we always have that one day off to accommodate for that, right?
Mhm.
So I'm understanding where the extra add is then.
Are you saying that teachers are working an additional half-day?
Teachers are
that's why
working
they-
one additional day.
Okay.
We can do,
The two evenings. They're working the
right,
two.
they're doing
one
the 2
additional.
evenings
They
count for the
always
day.
do.
So we need to come up with a place to put that extra day.
But they always work that, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, and then we always have one day to accommodate for those 2 evenings.
Correct.
So that's standard, that's been a matter of,
Correct.
you know, okay, so I'm thinking, I'm just trying to reconcile the extra stuff.
So here's what we could do. You can think of it a couple different ways. So if you want to count the 27th as the day, then we're good with the day. What that means is we now have 184 days. So we either have to go at the end of the year, which is May 28th, 29th, and 30th for finals, and back up
Hold on,
one
stop
day.
there for a second. So if we add the date at the end of the year, what it does is it wraps Memorial Day weekend with final exams, which we don't think is a good idea.
That was what I was explaining.
Yeah, so that day, we think makes more sense to put on the Friday of President's Day
I think
weekend.
what
So in
can-
other words, if we had school on the Friday of President's Day weekend, then our final exams would start on the Friday leading into Memorial Day weekend and conclude on Tuesday, Wednesday after Memorial Day weekend.
But I think what is being missed, though, is the leap year.
day.
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
that's why
That's what
there's
it
the
is.
extra
Yep.
day.
And we didn't notice until just,
That's,
Yeah, leap year day is an extra day.
Because
We
of
have to
leap
take
day,
a day off.
we have
Yeah.
to, we have 184
4.
days. That's where the extra day is coming from, not really related to conferences at all.
So next year, we'll have to have another solution for that.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Thank
But
you.
what I wanted to clarify with that, and it seems to be the case, but I just want to be certain that we're not giving up the school improvement days like what we had last week and everything. They're still getting those 4, one each quarter, so that
Correct.
they can have the planning time and all of that. Okay, great.
Correct.
And teachers do they like the idea of the extra conferences? I'm sorry.
So, yeah, there are teachers who have had to make as many as 20 phone calls to parents. They'd much rather have a conference.
Okay,
Call
So,
those
So this
callbacks,
is
because
a-
that's work that happens after the conferences if they're
Right.
not able to fit them in.
so this is a good thing. They're-
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the big thing that we were trying to accommodate is that a lot of our families cannot access, we're assuming that everyone is off of work, you know, during the evening time, when we have a lot of families people who actually work in the evening and are off in the day. So that way they can go to participate in the conferences.
and we are looking to keep them virtual through Zoom. That's been, we've found that to be really helpful, not only for our teachers, but also for the parents. You're not sitting around in a gym waiting for the next one. You can grab your dinner or pick your kid up from whatever and jump back on a Zoom. So we're looking to continue that as well. So if we had even an afternoon, if people wanted to take a lunch break or something at work, they could run a couple conferences if they had things to do in the evening, so.
Just from my standpoint, I think it's great that we're trying this, and I hope, you know, we'll take the time to get the feedback back, but to not have the traditional hours and to give parents the opportunity to get in during the evening, but also what I'm hopeful is that where teachers need to and want to, you know, invite the parents to a conference, that this gets more of them there. So I'm glad we're doing that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And actually, to piggyback to what Dr. Rowe was saying, I was going to ask if historically we had ever offered daytime conferences, like if there ever was a time when we did, to your recollection.
Scott, you know that.
Not in my experience, no.
Yeah, no, we've always had the 2 evening, 5 to 9 and 5 to 8:30.
Okay, so this is really kind of
Exciting.
the first time we've done this.
Yeah, I mean, in the olden days, you had a South Campus conference night and a North Campus conference night because of kids who had commuting. So when we moved them all into the field house, we at least, parents didn't have 2 nights they had to worry about. They could get them all one-stop shopping was the mantra.
I think it's great that we're doing the time option. I guess the only other question I had is if when you guys were considering this, I mean, are there any other districts you know that at the high school level? I mean, obviously, you know, with the younger grades, it's different, but at the high school level, if there are other districts that have offered daytime as well, or some historically evenings for people.
Yeah,
Probably
there
most,
are,
right?
and the state actually incentivizes it because they can, they would like to see that happen as well. So they technically let these days count as an attendance day for students, so.
Most high schools do have a daytime conference slot.
Great. I believe too. I'm curious, you know, to see how that works out for us this year. Or next year, I should say.
Can you remind us, so this is the August 21st proposal, and we had a second proposal that was, what, August 17th for the start? What was the nemesis of that? Did that second proposal come from the LTEA? Or, no?
No, it was
not-
really just two, it was
another
just two different
version
versions.
that
It was basically,
considered?
we want to
Okay.
start on the 17th with kids and have a couple of days, to
Right.
do SEL lessons or relationship building kickoff, and then start on the Monday. But like Scott said, overwhelming feedback was, let's start on the 21st.
Okay, and I don't know how feedback was gathered, or if some of it was anonymous, or if it was all emails, or from what constituencies, but do you think the negative feedback on the August 17th start was solely related to the weird, or unusually long winter break? Like, was that a distracting factor that people said, no, I have to pick anything but this because it's such an odd break, or was it
That was more
more
the-
granular
it was more
feedback
the
to where you
It was
really
the
feel?
earliness.
Yeah.
The earliness of the
perfect.
start,
That's what I
the
was hoping
shortening
for.
of summer, the book pickup would have to happen too early. What about camps? What about athletics? I mean, most of it was about August.
Great.
You know, people who didn't like the winter, we talked about that, we were gonna move that off of there anyway.
Right.
So we could have done an August 17th start, still had a 2-week winter break, and just built those 2 extra
And
days
that's what I
into
thought we
like
were
the
going to
spring.
present.
We could do that.
And I
yeah.
was worried that the odd winter break was the distracting
Yeah.
comment, but it sounds like it was the early start, so.
No, and some
that makes
people
a lot of
wanted the
sense.
extra days in front of winter break. I mean, some people want spring conferences. I mean, there's lots of suggestions.
Glad that it was
Emailed
out
to
there.
Mr. Eggerty.
So happy your
It's
email
always
was
good
going on
that
there.
you sought feedback and you received feedback, so I'm glad to hear that.
I got to meet
Right.
many community members virtually.
Good.
Do the community members include our students? Feedback from our students?
Did they what? I couldn't-
Does the community include student feedback?
Oh,
So
yeah.
do we, yeah.
Did you hear from our students then? I was curious if they weighed in on their, on how they felt about that. 'Cause I thought they could be passionate about it if they were paying attention.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
So without any further discussion, that'll be the recommendation Monday night to approve the calendar as presented here. With the 176 school days, it will have a 10-day imbalance between first and second semester, 83, 93, which is typical, and 183 teacher workdays. One of the things, and maybe it probably doesn't hurt to explain it to everyone as well, you'll notice that we have emergency days built into the calendar. That is required by the state, even though they now allow us to use remote learning days in lieu of closing the school down. So we probably will never use those extra days, but they make us put them in there, so. But we still, just in case, and also because many of our middle schools don't finish the same week we do, we don't start summer school till the 10th, so they can finish up their school years and not have 8th graders here and finishing 8th grade. So,
And I think I mentioned this last time, but I'll share this with our associate schools as well, pending board approval on the 17th.
Only other question I had about second semester is related to commencement being on the 29th during the same time that finals is happening. Is that a typical scenario?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's usually on the Wednesday, like last year it was on the second day of finals, so it's
Okay.
usually on that second day.
Okay. I know, obviously, it doesn't affect our seniors, but,
Right.
okay.
that gives us, depending on the weather, a Wednesday, a Thursday, Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday to get a graduation. And assuming we have air conditioning units delivered, we will not have access to the field house like we did this past summer.
So but that's not related to the calendar we're reviewing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this year, we will be outside. Next year with this calendar, we can decide what to do, but,
Oh, that's true, that's a
yeah.
whole nother
So
year.
that, the calendar now has a long way away.
In my
many
calendar
calendars.
is 23, 24, 25.
But in May of '23, it will be outside, and we'll have to just keep backing it up day after day after day. Unless the units don't come in, and then, like we just talked about an hour ago, so,
And then it will be at
and
20.
then it will be inside. Or, then, yeah,
Yikes.
sorry. Okay.
Good, all right. And our final agenda item under curriculum and instruction is a summer workshop report. Scott Eggerdine.
All right, thank you again. This is an annual report we just share, really to highlight some of the work that was done over the summer, talk a little bit about the financials, and essentially it's a report. What you'll see is we had a wide range of workshops this past summer, everything from equity ambassador training and co-teaching training for 2 major new initiatives, to some course development for our new courses and some courses going through some updates and changes, and some new alignments, as well as tech training and freshman SEL curriculum review for PE. We did, there were a couple of anomalies this summer, and most of them had to do with, we had a couple of chairs and our Katie Smith, and Coordinator of Assessment and Research, all leave in June. And so a lot of people normally really good at hounding people to turn things in, weren't here hounding people to turn things in. We also didn't have the power in July, so some people chose to do sessions in August, and so we have some deadlines for grants for payment. So unfortunately, we had to use some district money instead of grant money for some of these workshops. That being said, the amount that was spent overall was 65% of what was approved, but we did see an increase of about $3,000 in what the district paid. Other than that, though, there was quite a bit of information. You had a chance to read through what each group did. I didn't include the ancillary updated workshop report components that include new curriculum maps or those types of things, but certainly reviewed everything along those lines. At one point, we had a pretty ambitious schedule in August for doing a lot of different trainings. We found that teachers were not, I guess perhaps like the students, all that interested in coming back for a week of extra trainings in early August. So the only one that ran was the tech training, and you have the list of all the people who were involved in that tech training in your packet as well. I think as anything in the summer, it's an opportunity to really dig into some things, and probably one that will have some of the best impact on our students and in our curriculum was the co-teaching workshop, an opportunity for everyone who's going to be involved in co-teaching over the next couple of years to get some initial training, and then those teachers, those 4 pairs who started in the fall, to really dig in. So that, if you recall, we were working with Marilyn Friend, and she unfortunately had an accident, car accident, but she attached us to a high school-oriented trainer who's done a phenomenal job. So she came in and got everybody rolling, and certainly Leslie can share with you the benefits of that, but you've got the information in the packet too. Really positive so far. She's coming back. Dr. Barron is coming back this Friday to meet with those 4 pairs individually, and on Thursday to observe the classes. So it's a good partnership, and it's really taken off. So very excited about where that's headed. Similarly, with having Goldie Muhammad here, working with a number of our staff through a training, and then also working with our equity ambassadors who are doing equity training this year using Goldie's framework. That was very successful this summer as well, and we've already secured Goldie Muhammad to return in January. And she's just a dynamic, positive force. I mean, such a great person to get in front of our staff. So So yeah, lots of good work this summer. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Were you saying she was working with the equity ambassadors and then she'll come back in January to work with them again, or?
To work with not only them, but with teaching teams throughout the school. I know Jen Rowe just has been talking with her about what that might look like. We haven't quite nailed that down yet, but she's very willing to be here all day to work with teams throughout the day. So we think that's a real benefit for
It's
everybody.
probably going to be a whole staff presentation, right, on January 9th, so.
Yes. I know we'll be meeting with our professional learning team to have their feedback on that experience, and then we'll be able to outline what our day will look like.
Got a couple questions on the grants, just to refresh. So if I'm on page 59, the nice summary. Thanks for the two colors to make it easy to see. So right in the middle of the page, the math science, where the math alt assessment was one of 4 or 5 budgeted items, but the only one budgeted for grant monies.
Correct.
And we, say 6,000 or so, and we actually only incurred 3,200. Some of that might be because, as you mentioned in the memo, we budget for a higher salary level than maybe who participated, and I think I've heard in years past, we offer this and encourage it, but we certainly aren't mandating teachers to,
Any summer
cancel a
work is all
conflict or
optional.
all optional
Yeah.
the summer work, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But are there, you alluded to and mentioned also more directly these, I guess that we missed out on some grant funding, and it was due to, what's the timing consideration?
Everything
It's
has to
all due
be,
by-
everything has to be submitted by mid-August. So we had some timesheets that didn't come in, we had some contracts that didn't come in, we had some teams that we didn't think were meeting that did meet.
Okay.
The list of people who did the tech training came in after the deadline. So lots of little things sort of compounded.
All the work, I wondered if there was a cutoff with when the work gets
Yeah.
done. It seems like it accommodates, mid-August is really butting up on the start of school, so all the work happened.
Right, and some
can
of
I
it
ask-
happened in the first 2 weeks of August, so the turnaround
So it's
time was
tight.
pretty tight.
Okay.
And it also has to be encumbered. So what we could have done, we could have just cut the checks without getting all the timesheets, but we would have cut too many checks and for too much money.
Oh, sure.
Right, so when we know for sure that the people are doing the work, but it's like, we have 2 summer grant deadlines. One is the end of June and one is the end of August. So you can have an extended school year and use July and August to do some of that work. When we have that June deadline, we need everything in by that last payroll of June. And that's really what we're gonna push for next year anyway. A lot of times, there's better focus then, we can get more people to come in and do the work right away, rather than sort of extend it out through the summer. So we're gonna do our best to just tighten up those timelines and make sure everybody gets
Yeah,
the
seems,
work in.
like you said, there were some different circumstances, but I guess
Right.
I would just ask that we try to implement some new procedure communication.
Absolutely,
Because
yeah.
I think, it stands out in the first and last category that was all supposed to be grant money, so I think we did use, 7,400 of district
Mm-hmm.
funds. Not 90,000, not a giant number, but it seems like it's avoidable, but tight at times, and if we can just, I'd like to see that not happen
Yeah,
next
I-
year
I
if possible.
do
I'm sure you do too.
I do too, and I
point out
wanted
the
to be
obvious.
totally transparent about it as well. You also notice the reason why there's a strike through for urban agriculture, that course didn't run. We
Of
didn't get
kids.
enough enrollment,
Okay.
so we didn't run that workshop. So that was 4,000 to the good on using district funds, and then obviously the others in the other direction. But
And the grant monies that weren't used, those don't remain or roll over? Or
they
does it
do roll
depend on
over,
the-
so ultimately that means we would have more money this year to spend
Okay, oh, that's a bright side.
on
That's
other
good.
items, so, that's a that is a positive, so.
Okay, great.
It would probably, most of it will be going to bringing in, Dr. Mohammed, so.
Okay, super, thank you.
Scott, thank you for the transparency, I appreciate it.
Sure.
And understand, as Julie mentioned, understand the circumstances and some of the turnover that we had
Mhm.
that probably led to that. With respect to the summer workshop, the US history course was the only one that really was toward, or as part of the curriculum review process
Correct.
that we're engaging on. And that was the only one, so, but that worked as a by and large, is not going to be reliant upon the summer to happen. Is that right?
Correct. What we wanted to do, before we embarked on all freshman core courses going through a curriculum review, we wanted a test group. The state of Illinois changed its social studies standards. They added some new inquiry standards, and that's for world history, U.S. history, and civics. Knowing world history would be involved in this process, we wanted to bring in U.S. history as well, so that rather than waiting 3 years for junior year, we wanted to do that right away. They were very interested in getting started with the work and willing to do the workshop. And so we felt that made a lot of sense to essentially do a pilot with them. And I'm glad we did. They ended up making some pretty major changes to their curriculum. Certainly it's not required. I mean, this is not a curriculum rewrite, it's a review. But in looking at the new inquiry standards, and they really decided to go thematic, and they decided to really kind of blow up all of U.S. history curriculum. So that took a lot of time in the summer. They put in a ton of work already, and they are meeting quarterly like the others are that are going through the freshman curriculum review. We're just able to drill down a little deeper into some of these major changes that they've made. So that's been good for them to get together and have that time to meet. And in that sense, it was helpful in the summer. Now, we may use summertime depending on where the teams get in the spring. But that'll all be a part of summer workshop proposals, and again, looking at maximizing the use of grants and other things.
Okay. Thank you.
Good stuff.
Lots of great
A
stuff.
lot of work, a lot of work. It's 212 people involved, so
Yes.
our staff is here. We're doing a lot.
It's amazing.
Well,
It is
I appreciate the
amazing.
board's support. So without it, I think a lot of things would start kind of clunky or take a while to get off the ground. So I mean, especially I think with co-teaching, it was essential to have that time, so.
Well, and I really appreciate all the staff and the teachers that are putting the extra time in the summer. Everyone needs a break, and this is awesome that people are that passionate, that they're willing to do that, so that's awesome.
And maybe now we have more air conditioning, we'll have more people interested.
So, that would be great.
All right, so student services, our final agenda item for this evening is a school safety update. Brian Waterman.
Yeah, I'm going to very quickly turn it over to our team here, but, you know, honestly, school safety is something that we look at continuously. I think the last significant update that was made here was 2018 with the implementation of the Blue Point system, transition to the ALICE options-based response from the traditional lockdown and barricade. And so we're always kind of looking, obviously, at different ways to maintain school safety, working very closely with our local agencies, police and fire. But I think this past summer was an even more significant update to school safety. And I know Jen will mention this, but huge kudos to Jen Tyrell and our building leadership team for really digging into this topic pretty significantly this summer. So Jen and Kevin, and I think a little bit of Leslie as well, is going to share some of the significant changes that have happened at the beginning of the school year. So.
Great, thank you, Dr. Waterman. So before I go through tonight's agenda for the presentation, just want to reiterate what Dr. Waterman shared. Going into the summer, as I shared with the board when we met in August, really our building leadership team had a few major things that we chose to dig into this summer. The first was school safety, the second was resetting behavior expectations, and then the third, resetting attendance expectations. And as Brian shared, we spent a significant amount of time talking about school safety. Kevin's here with me tonight, thrilled to have him. He is going to present the latter part of the presentation on VCI drill, ALICE protocol, and threat assessment. I'm going to talk through some of the things that we're implementing this fall as a result of our building leadership team's work this summer. But really a lot of credit goes to Kevin, Greg Gardner, and our assistant principals for really stepping back, looking at our processes, looking at our protocols. We knew that coming into this school year that safety was going to be on everybody's mind. As Dr. Waterman shared, school safety is always a priority for us. Unfortunately, there have been some recent tragedies that we knew would be on people's minds as they return to school this year. And so certainly that was on our mind as we planned for this year as well. So I'm really proud and appreciative of our entire building leadership team's work. I get to present it to all of you, but really they were the ones that did the heavy lifting this summer. Tonight, I want to share just a little bit, and I know we've had the chance to share this with the board before, but share a little bit about our Sandy Hook Promise programs that we've committed to here at LT that start with hello and say something. Talk a bit about safety updates for the 22-23 school year. That's slide 4. I'm going to spend most of my time on slide 4 and 5 tonight. The safety and security assessment that took place here at LT this summer, our threat assessment protocol, VCI drill, and then dig into ALICE protocols a little bit, and then conclude by talking a little bit more about building a say something culture here at LT. As we had shared previously, and all of our board members know, we started the year with our SEL lessons. Again, that's something that we're continuing to talk about as we move from this year into next year. It's so odd, we're already planning, right, for next year. We're receiving feedback from students, from staff, from teachers, and we're already talking about, forming a committee to co-plan those SEL lessons. It was a topic of conversation at our PLT last week, and something that we're getting input from really all stakeholders on, so we'll see an adjustment there. But something that we did this year that was a little bit different than we had done previously, rather than just kind of starting day one with inclusion activities, icebreakers, getting to know you activities, first period, first day of school, we grounded that work in start with hello. So rather than just jumping right into those icebreakers, we grounded it in a research-based program that is a youth violence prevention program. We also brought that content to our freshmen on Freshman Experience Day. Brian Radovich, class of 2026 assistant principal, presented to each and every freshman on Freshman Experience Day. He presented with members of our Save Promise Club. They shared work that they're extremely passionate about with our incoming students. And I think that just shows how important this is to us, that every single freshman that's starting their LT experience, we guaranteed a few experiences, and that was one of them. We also had our Start with Hello week, September 19th through the 23rd. Unfortunately, it's a national week, so it ran the same time as our homecoming. Hopefully that doesn't happen in the future, but our group, our Save Promise group, really wanted to stick with the national week, and certainly we're supportive of that, given that it is a national research-based program. So we had some activities throughout the course of the week, some connection and inclusion activities. We served lemonade at both North and South campuses on Tuesday or Wednesday morning, just opportunities for our students to connect. Save Promise partnered with PSI, another one of our co-curriculars, to facilitate a lunchtime experience where students can just connect with people that they've connected with previously or make some new contacts and friends. And Start with Hello is all about 3 steps: seeing someone alone, reaching out, and seeing if you could help, and really just starting with hello. So really proud of the fact that all of our students were connected to that program and that content right away at the start of the school year. Moving on to slide 4, safety updates for the 22-23 school year. All of our assistant principals and associate principals, with the exception of Greg Gardner and I, who were new to the team last year, are fully certified in ALICE protocols. Kevin Brown will talk more about ALICE protocols, which, as Dr. Waterman shared, something that we've done here since 2018, when we had a shift from a more traditional lockdown to looking at those types of situations a little bit more fluidly and choosing an options-based approach. So Kevin will talk a little bit more about that, but our APs went through recertification this summer. We also established drill dates, so we are required to complete safety drills. We're required to complete an active shooter drill. For us, that's a VCI drill, 3 evacuation or fire drills, and then also a severe weather drill. So we completed that VCI drill on August 31st. We've already completed 1 evacuation drill and have an upcoming evacuation drill on October 18th. Then if all goes well with the weather in the spring, we tried this last year, it worked out really well. We'll take 1 day, we'll implement a communication schedule, and we'll get our last evacuation drill in and also do a severe weather drill at the same time. Something else that was done this summer last year when we were looking at protocols within our severe weather drill at South Campus, we noticed that our severe weather evacuation routes had many of our classes that are located on the second floor staying there and sheltering in place. So Greg had a collaborative conversation with Western Springs Police and Fire Department this summer to look at a more preferred routing system for severe weather at South Campus. So we've adjusted all of our maps at South Campus and have all of our students in classes moving to the first floor in the event of severe weather. Certainly, in the event that we don't have an incident before the drill, or even if we have an incident before the drill, we'll have to do a little bit of a movement study to make sure that our routes have students in the best possible spot and there's no overcrowding issues that would cause us to have to reroute students. So those were all updated. Those maps were all updated as well and shared with our staff. We thought it was really important to convene our safety committee. So we have a multidisciplinary safety committee that's made up of teachers, staff members, our law enforcement, both of our school resource officers, and students as well as members of our administrative team. And when our team, under Kevin's leadership, started talking about planning our VCI drill for this year, as I shared before, we knew it would be school safety, school security, these types of situations would be on everyone's mind. We thought it would be particularly important that we talked with that team and got feedback from that team in order to help guide the way in which we would facilitate our VCI drill this year. So in late June or early July, we brought in that team, heard different perspectives, got feedback, and then Kevin took the lead on our building leadership team in planning that. Certainly our plans were shared with our LTEA, so we worked very closely with Andrew Johannes to have him review our plans as well. Amy Johnson, another member of our LTEA executive board who serves on our safety committee, worked continuously with both of our school resource officers, and also Drew Eder as our mental health professional. So we also thought it was very important that he's involved in the conversation, and actually state code mandates that a mental health professional is involved in the planning, and also that there are options for students, and we believe that this is best practice as well, for them to seek support if and when needed on the day of that type of drill. Kevin will talk more about the VCI drill. Another thing that we did this summer was we updated our classroom flip charts. There weren't a lot of updates needed. I'll talk a bit about our work with Paul Tim, our safety consultant. Paul did review our classroom flip charts as part of our assessment and auditing process and gave us very few tweaks to make, but all classroom flip charts were updated. The old charts were removed from classrooms and office spaces across both of our campuses, and the new charts were hung in those spaces as well. Visitor protocols were updated as well as we were looking at our processes, our procedures, our protocols. One of the things that we wanted to tighten up this year is our process for visitors on our campuses. So we created new email addresses for our staff to use. Those are internal email addresses for our staff to use in order to request a visitor and get that visitor on our approved list. So we tightened up that process as well. Certainly, I've shared with our families and the community that we are requesting that everybody makes an appointment before coming to the building. We understand that there are exceptions. There are times when people need to come in, and we will do everything within our power to be able to serve and connect and meet with those individuals. Sometimes it's not possible if members of our school team are not available at that point in time, but we're asking that all of our staff notify us of visitors so that we can have a handle at who's in the building and make sure those visitors are cleared to be in the building. Our camera system has been upgraded, so this is also a really good thing that was completed prior to this school year. So prior to this year, we had a pretty outdated hard drive. Adam Davis would be able to talk the techie terms. I'm talking more globally here, but last year, our camera system, the footage was only saved for 2 to 3 days. So you had 3 days in order to capture content and footage from that system. That presents a problem in the event that, you don't get a report, a complaint, have to open up an investigation within that few days that footage is available. Our new upgraded system keeps footage for 30 days. So we are really happy with the system thus far. We also added a few additional cameras, and we'll continue to rotate those cameras out to have the most updated hardware possible over the course of the next several years. So our goal is coverage at our campuses and to have optimal hardware to go with our software and server as well. Probably the thing that I'm most excited about is the work that we did with Paul Tim, our safety consultant. Paul came to campus and spent 9 hours with myself and our building leadership team on July 12th, and then came back on August 23rd. So he spent a lot of time with us walking through both campuses. He looks at hardware, he looks at the facility, he asks us questions about protocol, processes, about personnel. He looks at our technology system. He's a national expert that happens to be a local expert. So he's based out of Lamont. I had worked with him previously in my previous district and had an outstanding experience working with him. He's a very thorough approach. He pointed things out to our team as he walked with us, and then also provided us a preliminary report following his initial walkthrough, and then a final report a couple weeks after his August 23rd walkthrough. Very valuable experience for our team. There were some things that he pointed out on our walkthroughs, and he said those need to be fixed now, and those were adjustments that were made before the start of the year. An example of that is, he asked about cameras and asked if we had any cameras that operationally were not functioning, and we acknowledged that there were 1 or 2 across our 2 campuses, and he said those have to be removed right now because they present a liability concern. So our building team works with our tech department, B&G, pulls those cameras down. Just one example. Probably the most visible example is our use of the tunnel here at North Campus. So we had significant conversation, and I know that this conversation had occurred previously under Dr. Waterman's leadership and probably prior principals as well. But we talked a lot about the tunnel following Paul Tim's visit. And he talked to our team about it, and our old process presented concern for multiple reasons. One, we're looking at a lot of safety things, adjustments. We're trying to limit our risk. And with students traveling between the 2 buildings during each passing period, the front doors and the Vaughn doors were open for 6 minutes. That's over an hour a day that we had our entrances wide open. Certainly, we have student assistance at those entrances, but still, as the crowd's coming in, it presented a concern that other people could come in as well. And our team talked about it for a while. We had some significant conversations. Our central leadership team talked about it following, and we believe that the time was right to make that adjustment. Really proud of the way that our students have embraced that change. Certainly, there's a bit of inconvenience associated with it, and that's true when you make safety changes. And Kevin says this, and I think he says it best, but when you up the ante on safety and you prioritize limiting risk, oftentimes you are lowering convenience, but really proud of the way that our students have adapted. Certainly, the tunnel was crowded. It still is, but at the beginning of the year, they were getting used to it. They were getting used to the pace that they needed. Bless you. Not all our students walk with the pace that I have, Mr. Stashak. No problem. But it's already become part of our culture. And
there's no traveling outside.
No. They're traveling between the 2 buildings using the tunnel. Mhm. And they're doing,
Made the cover of the Lion.
it did. I'm featured several times in the Lion. Enjoy it all. The tunnel's one of the topics. I think, they've done a really, really nice job, and we're, proud of the way that they've embraced that change. So as I shared, Paul walked the buildings with our campuses in July and then again in August. The assessment and the follow-up report categorizes recommendations within the areas of facility. I would say some of those are capital improvement projects as well, processes and protocols, application of technology, supervision and personnel, and emergency protocols. He's a great contact for us to have. I've established a really good rapport with him, have run a few things by him since he's been here, and he's really open to that continuous dialogue with members of our team. As I shared, we made some immediate adjustments, and we continue to deconstruct the report. So we've deconstructed the reports on both of our campuses, have categorized the recommendations, and we'll continue to chip away at some of those recommendations over the course of this year and beyond. Shall I pause for questions on this part of the presentation, Brian, or do you want us to? So I'll stop and pause and just take any questions that you might have on some of those changes. A lot of work has been done, and I'm really proud, and we're going to continue to prioritize this work over the course of this year.
I'll jump in and say thank you. Thank you for prioritizing safety and minimizing risk. Despite inconveniences, it absolutely has to be our, number one priority to keep our kids safe here, keep our staff safe here, and to be constantly looking at it in an ever-changing environment and in the ever-changing world that we're living in, and adapting and making sure that we're current, best practice, all of that. So thank you so much for doing that. I was particularly happy about the safety audit, and Brian, you and I had talked about that in the early spring. And so I was thrilled that you engaged with Paul on that type of a safety audit. Thrilled that you made adjustments to the tunnel and the movement of our students. So just kudos, thank you. I'm speaking as one of 7 board members, but for me, it is of paramount and the highest priority that we stay vigilant on safety. And I guess with that, just a question related to the recommendations and the tracking chart. So as I reviewed all of the priorities and Paul's ranking system of 1 through 4, of what he felt, was paramount, it being number 1, and then 4 not so much. As I looked through those, some of those, to me, seemed like they could be pretty easy to accomplish, in terms of labeling doors properly and proper signage and so forth. So, and I heard you say that you're chipping away at them and so forth. Others require some financial commitments and so forth. So my ask would be to bring this back to the board with updated as to what has been handled, put financials to the tasks and the exercises that are going to require funding, and let's look at that, and let's look at how we can prioritize those things as soon as possible. The second part of that for me is, and I assume Paul would have brought this into his safety audit, but when we talk about the Alice protocol, which I know, Kevin, you're going to talk a little bit about, but does he incorporate things to better prepare classrooms for barricades and so for like more automatic barricading and so forth? Does he talk about some of the devices and the systems that are available, and would he have recommended those
Kevin
things?
actually talks about that.
Okay, so you're going to
Yeah.
talk about that. Okay, and then what was the last thing? The last thing was, and this is just an example. Clearly, there's a lot of overlap between North and South Campus and some of the pressing issues. And the thing that really jumps out at me is our communication devices, our PA systems, the way teachers communicate this year, just this year alone. From a personal standpoint, my daughter has been in classrooms where there have been medical emergencies, and I know last year we had an incident where staff was needed, but instead of pressing the intercom or pressing something, I'll just use the medical emergency that was most recent. The teacher ran out into the hallway to call for help. So that kind of triggers the thought process of me of like, what else, do we have the right systems in place in the classroom? Because you never want to see a teacher leave the classroom when a student is having a medical emergency, the adult to leave the classroom. So I'm hoping we can get to all of that, and I think part of it is they were captured in his recommendations, and it's just a matter of coming back and prioritizing and coming to the board and all of us work together to figure out how we can financially prioritize these very important projects.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, and I think that they capture the essence of what we intend to do as a building, and we have been doing as a building leadership team. Like you said, some of the small-scale recommendations, those are things that we intend on completing as soon as possible because we're not limited by any type of financial restriction or anything like that. But I appreciate your comments. I should have mentioned this. Paul Tim works with our associate schools as well. So on Friday, he is actually going to be here for our Institute Day, and he's going to be presenting to our student assistants and admin assistants, and then admin assistants from our associate schools, de-escalation techniques and some other safety-related items as well. So really excited about that, like community collective opportunity to engage with him. And then one of the things that our essays are going to do in the afternoon, certainly through an assessment, we didn't test every single call button. We're going to be completing testing on our call buttons in the afternoon with our student assistants since they'll be on campus. We're also going to make sure that all of our maps are updated in each of our classrooms, confirm again that flip charts are there, and then look at one other building-related item. So utilizing our personnel as well to make sure that we complete a thorough review of each of our classrooms is something that's up for this week.
That's great.
Now, I thought that each classroom had a phone. No?
Emergency call button. Yeah, we're supposed to have about 100 people here Friday for the
Wow.
training for call
That's
teams.
great.
So it'll be
Should be good.
all 6 of our associate schools and LT.
Thank you. I'll turn it. Go ahead, Carrie. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add that I really appreciate the team getting together again like this and putting together such a comprehensive group of people on both North and South Campus and bringing in experts where we need them. But again, also to engaging with tools that, as you mentioned, Dr. Tyrell, national research-based programs with Sandy Hook Promise, that is also another part of how we kind of wrap our heads around the preventative measures that we can take to be proactive, to prevent violence or depression, isolation, all kinds of other things that kind of contribute to some of these problems or exacerbate what's going on in the world today, unfortunately. So I really appreciate that you really wrapped that component into this and really made it a comprehensive community collaborative type of effort. And so everything that you've done with Sandy Hook Promise as part of this too is tremendous and huge. So thank you for doing all that and engaging with faculty members and with our Save Club, who are pretty incredible. I think, who is our sponsor for the Save Club again?
Pat Callahan and Luke
Yeah.
Jansen. And they've done a great job with our kids, and our kids are really, really passionate. And as much as we can involve them, right, we can share these important concepts and lessons and programs. But when it's your student leaders working with their sponsors to be the voice of these really important programs, I think that's when you see things amplified within a school community.
Absolutely. It's lessons, I think, even as adults that we can learn and take with us too. So thank you for doing that.
Thanks, Carrie, and it's a perfect segue to Kevin's section, because that's probably exactly how he'll start, by talking about the relationships and connections that really are the starting point for us here.
Great.
Good evening. President Dillon, there was a question about the microphone. Are you able to hear me at an acceptable level?
You sound great, Kevin. I like to hear your voice, Kevin. You have a radio voice. So.
Thank you. It was one semester of glory in college. I would like to steal the opportunity. I don't often sit with the board to express my thanks, my heartfelt gratitude for your support. We feel it, and it means everything to us as we serve our children. So thank you. As I shared with the LTCAC last week, the two topics that I'll be here to discuss with you and certainly try to answer questions around threat assessment and VCIs, they're not the heartbeat, right, of what Lyons Township High School represents. Those moments, those Friday night games and the incredible curricula that our students engage with on a day-to-day basis. That's why we're here, and that's what we do. This work is probably parallels sort of those disaster preparedness with the airlines and the flight, the training that flight attendants and pilots go through on those worst kind of scenarios, hoping, praying that you never ever need it and never have to engage with it. But we certainly recognize that what keeps us the most safe as a school community are the relationships that our teachers, your faculty, build with your children, with our students, the positive experiences, the joyful moments, and then the interventions when students are in crisis, those networks of safety that I know that the board has heard so much about from Leslie Owens and the members of our student services team. And so, but this is important, as Member Albert made reference to. This is a focus. It must be a focus for all schools. Just a quick background, knowing that the board may have questions. So in 2019, the state legislature passed the school threat assessment law. It essentially required that schools develop both threat assessment teams and threat assessment protocols to operate under. And on page 113, if you're following in the board packet, you can see just a quick list of first of all, the district threat assessment team, and then the formal teams that are built at each of our 2 campuses. You will note that they are not just comprised of administrators, but certainly a strong representation from student services, school psychologists, counselors, social workers, as well as teachers, and then essentially, or critically, our school resource officers as well. And so now that we've established that we certainly have teams and use teams, I wanted to share a little bit about the protocol. So the protocol is essentially derived directly from the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines, CSTAG. It's really the best thinking, the current thinking in threat assessment. It actually has some of its strong origins in the work of the United States Secret Service, the Protective Services, and the work that they've done for decades around protecting public officials and evaluating threats. And some of the work that they have done at the University of Virginia, along with substantial research and input from educators. A couple of points just to shine a light on with the board that are essential in this work. First of all, what we know is that profiles and checklists don't work. We all are of an age that we well remember the late 90s in the Columbine era and some of the news reports about fears about students in trench coats, right, that stemmed from that, and terrible labeling that was done, the damage that was done by sort of painting with a broad brush and labeling or creating that sort of hysteria. And so what we know is that that kind of checklists or profiles is really not the end game here. Support. The goal is always to prevent violence. You'll hear me say that several times. The goal is not to predict or to be predictive or make odds that this is likely to happen or this is not likely. At the end of every threat assessment, the team's charge is to do whatever is necessary to prevent violence. And so that, rather than prediction, is the focus. So what does a threat assessment process have as its goal? The goal is to understand and classify, and of course then, most importantly, to take action, to take whatever steps are deemed important. There are roughly 2 categories that you could think of in sort of grouping the threats that we see. The first and least concerning would be considered transient threats, right? So there's a fender bender in the parking lot and someone hops out of the car angry and, you know, I'm gonna beat your, I'm gonna, you know, I'll kill you for that. You know, those kinds of heat of the moment, no plan, just a fast reaction, certainly a concern, but we can explain them as passing. Those represent the vast majority of the kinds of cases that teams deal with, roughly 3 out of 4. The more serious kind are considered, or what we call substantive. And substantive threats, again, would even fall into 2 further classifications. One being very serious. substantive. The line might be that a substantive threat might be the kind of hitting or slapping or fighting or punching, and then you would cross into a line of very serious substantive would be things like assaulting, homicide, those kinds of things. And so those are rare. The numbers tell us very clearly that those are rare, but those are roughly the classifications. I've learned, working with Leslie, to make sure and always say that this process is not the process that we use for students who are expressing suicidal ideation. There's an extremely valid and a process that we're much more experienced with, quite frankly, for students who are expressing thoughts of suicide. And that this process does not, is not used when those concerns are present at all. Good. Got that in? Good. And so you'll see a flow chart on 114. It may be a bit hard to read. I think the key is that there's a process. The team goes through a series of questions for ourselves. It's a bit of a script, really. There are a list of questions, many of which do not apply in every circumstance, some of which do. But each member, whether it's a counselor or a teacher or an assistant principal or the school resource officer, each member attempts to contribute what they may know of the circumstances. They attempt to guide through the steps of a threat assessment to again, with that goal of preventing violence. So that at each step, if the threat assessment process proceeds and we determine that there is a substantive threat, the goal then is to put in a safety plan, a plan of action. Sometimes those plans look like schedule changes or safety checks in the morning, check-ins with staff. Sometimes they look like a criminal charges and or a change in placement, right? They can be very, very strong kinds of steps and actions to take. But that's all guided by what the team sees as the individual set of facts in those circumstances. So in that sense, the facts guide the process, and they're, of course, always different in each of the cases. If I could just take a turn and go to a completely separate topic now, they're not necessarily connected, but I know that Dr. Tyrell indicated that I was going to go through BCI and as well as our ALICE protocols. So ALICE, I know that the board has heard that acronym before. It's a nationally recognized protocol that is essentially presenting students and staff with options. If you had to distill it to its core, it is about providing students and staff with options in a moment of crisis. And that was a change, as Dr. Waterman made reference to in 2018. Prior to that, we had planned and trained around a lockdown mentality. And so that was an organizational shift as we learned and adapted to best practice. And the options really being of a evacuation or a lockdown and barricade kind of scenario. And so each fall, we certainly present our students with an opportunity to understand a bit about that evacuation process. We do it outside of the drill itself, knowing that there are some nerves and some emotions around drills, and our goal is never to add fear as one of the elements of a drill. And so actually our physical welfare department, prior to our BCI drills, do safety walks, and they actually walk with our students to our reunification sites as part of their PE classes, in a non-threatening, low-stakes kind of way. And then we did conduct our BCI drill this fall, and we connected with local law enforcement and fire officials. They were present during the drill. We had conversations in classrooms around the protocols, what could be done, evacuation routes, things like stairs, things like evacuation sites for the disabled. And quite honestly, we gave time to have conversations around barricading and then practicing barricading. Remember, Albert, you had a question. Sometimes this kind of work is really not intuitive, but the best thinking right now, Paul Tim is someone that I will quote, really discourages schools from going down that route of purchasing specific devices. Two things. One, the Alice protocol is not really about schools responding. It's the kind of mental process that can be used in a movie theater or a shopping mall or a church. It is not exclusive to schools. It could be used anywhere. This notion of, gosh, the safest place to be in a dangerous crisis is away. And so we do tell our teachers and our students that if they decide and they perceive that it's possible to leave, to evacuate, that's always the preferred option. If they decide that they need to stay and must barricade, we want them to know sort of what that looks like. But what the real goal is would be to create that mindset of problem solving around the things that you would normally find in any space. And it would be different in every space. We have classrooms with desks, we have classrooms with tables, we have classrooms with refrigerators, and on and on and on. And so there's a variety of experiences that students and teachers talk through and discuss. And then we conducted the drill, and then each period we had subsequent conversations throughout that day as we presented the VCI. I think this is something that we've covered before for the board, but essentially schools have to conduct three fire drills, one weather drill, sometimes we refer to that as the tornado drill, and then now the latest addition is this VCI. We must conduct one VCI drill each fall. And so we have done that. We've followed up and have done a debrief with police and fire officials. We're always looking for their input, for feedback. We learn something every time we do this. And so I could go on, but I would like to just pause and allow the board to ask questions if there are any.
So then when the drill is happening, then most teachers and students are barricading, staying in place. There are none that are deciding that, because it's a drill, there are none that are deciding that it's safe to be able to exit or go out the window. Like at South Campus, there's like those floor kind of windows that they can maybe pull out to get out.
That's right. What we ask them to do is to talk about that. We ask them to talk about the methods of egress, the methods of evacuation from that classroom, and we ask them to do that in each of the classroom periods. But you're exactly right. During the drill, we do not actually send students and staff out of the building. That's correct. That's correct.
So the conversations happen each period, but the barricade practice happens one period.
That's correct. Yeah.
So the barricade conversation you're saying only happens in one period?
One period. Yep.
Why wouldn't that happen in every?
It's a practice. So we actually have students and staff who are barricading the door in that room. That is done during third period. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes, start to finish, is normally the sort of time frame that we use.
But Jill, to your point, in other classes, we ask them to talk through the scenario.
Got it. So
We just
it's
didn't-
actually done there.
Correct.
Because I'm just wondering if you're in a gym class, that's much different than like a class where you could move a desk maybe in front of a
Yep.
door or something. That was just my,
Yep, that was one of the talking points that we asked our teachers to
Got
go
it.
with our students each period. They just physically practiced during one of the periods.
okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
I just thought it was only the one.
And your point is well made. The realities are vastly different in a gymnasium than in a biology classroom. That's
Right.
exactly right.
Yeah, I just thought you had talked about it, so I misunderstood.
Well, that's
so.
relatively new. I mean, I would say the last 3 years is when we built in the period-by-period conversations around that classroom, but yeah, the barricading happens just once, the actual barricading.
The actual bit, but the talk about it.
Yep,
You could say, you could move this desk, you could do this. Got it.
right, right.
Thanks for clarifying.
I think I just want to reiterate, thank you for tending to this. Thank you for keeping this at the highest priority. Clearly a very tough subject. But it is emergency preparedness and we need to, have these tough conversations and these tough drills and, it's where we are, unfortunately. Again, my ask from a board perspective, and my fellow board members, I'm wondering if there's any concurrent here, is to take the recommendations by Paul's group and put financials to them, monetize them. Let us know, bring it back to us. Let us know what's done, what's still on there, where, as I read some of the things, I thought, well, maybe you all might not agree with his level of prioritization on this one and why. There are other things that I thought, like one was requiring all staff members to wear lanyards and IDs. And so in my mind, I was thinking like, well, what's the obstacle to that? So I'd love to have the presentation where we actually kind of drill into some of these things from a prioritized level, from a financial level, and talk about what we should fund to. The camera example that you gave, Jen, was a good example because that was something that we approved money for in the spring. You said it was finished, but, and when you talked about it, but I also heard you say that there's opportunity or there's going to be needs to rotate in and out. And
Yeah, just the upgrade to the system was completed. There's
but not
still
the actual
some.
Not the-
hardware.
Correct.
So that would
Hardware,
be-
but not the cameras.
not the camera, so I would love to see that and, along with all the other things and figure out how we put it into a plan to get it done.
Yeah, we're gonna be unpacking that, and there's no doubt we're gonna be bringing recommendations for additional purchases to the board, for sure.
Just a quick question, with the reunification site, is it, like at South Campus, is it one place for all?
Yes,
And then North one place?
that's correct.
Okay.
It's, was it Park Junior High for
Right.
North Campus?
And then a
St.
church
John's
at,
Cross.
St. Jonathan Cross. That's
St. Jonathan
correct.
Cross, yes.
And that's practiced before.
right, right.
Do the kids learn, I'm undereducated on the topic, I think. Do the kids learn this ALICE acronym, or I seem to recall like a run, fight, hide, or run, hide, fight, I don't remember the order. Is there a shorter one that is also discussed?
That is a very similar, that's not the
Okay, it's a
nomenclature that
okay.
we've adopted, but yes, that is a very, that has at its core options as well.
Okay, understood.
Do you want to finish with the?
Yeah,
You already kind of talked about say something. You want to finish with that?
Sure, I would just say, we talked throughout the course of the night about Sandy Hook Promise programs, relationship building, importance of connections. We talked about threat assessment. I think something that is really important is just continuing to create a say something culture, and our kids do a phenomenal job of it. When something is not right, encouraging them to tell a trusted adult, and our staff and our teachers do a really good job at connecting with APs, with associates, with myself, when there are things that we need to look into. And, a threat assessment is one thing on paper, but getting a report from a student that goes to a teacher that comes comes to us, that calls for convening the team, brings to life some of the things that we know are best practice, and there are examples of that. So the more that we can do to continue to reinforce that type of culture, to make sure all of our students have a trusted adult here, that matters. That matters significantly when you're talking about school safety, security, and how students feel within this building. So just wanted to close that way. Thanks for giving us the time tonight. Obviously, one of the most important topics, and something that Kevin, myself, Dr. Waterman, and really our entire team is super passionate about. So thank you, and thank you for your support.
Just one final thought on that. The board will hear a consensus update from the LTCAC. So this presentation was also delivered to them a week or two ago. So we had 71 community members, and parents, and students, and staff there. And so they gave a ton of feedback on kind of, how to move forward. So we'll be, actually Shelley Taylor, our LTCAC chair, will be presenting that on October 17th.
Great.
That's great.
So just another quick question regarding the Blue Point activation. Is that just when you push it, it goes to all law enforcement in the area, the regional area, or to Western Springs and LaGrange police, fire?
It's an excellent question, Member Thompson. So there are three things that happen when you activate the Blue Point system. One, there's a PA announcement. It's a recording that gives instructions to initiate Alice protocols immediately. At the same time, there are blue strobes that we positioned at entrances, as well as in high volume spaces, by the sound level, cafeterias, gymnasiums. The Reber Auditorium comes to mind. They're not everywhere, but the blue strobes are used in areas where a PA announcement may be difficult to hear. And then the third piece is notifications. And the notifications go out in a variety of ways. We send emails and text messages to people in the building. It's only for those in the building, students and staff. But there's also an LTAC, that's the shared police and fire dispatch between LaGrange, LaGrange Park, and Western Springs. And part of our agreement with Blue Point is the monitoring service that actually calls LTAC to dispatch first responders immediately. One additional piece that we've been able to weave in is that in addition to the emails and text messages going to students and staff, we've also we host a police and fire articulation meeting every year, and we harvest their own cell numbers, their work cell numbers that they use. And so they are also able to get those notifications immediately to their own each of their devices. And so we have the entire command structure, police and fire of our local communities are added to our list as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. At this time, we will begin the non-agenda related portion of our public comments. Marilyn, do we have any non-agenda related comments?
No.
Okay. So can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you everyone for coming. Have a great night.
Thanks, Carrie.
Great week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.